baker's fault. When you made us stumble and you were angered because of him, and you sent me into prison. There was a man there that interpreted our dreams.
You would have my dreams interpreted by a slave?
Not I.
What is this?
Not I, but Potiphar would.
Pharaoh, there was a man that worked for me, named Joseph. The day before you beheaded the baker, the day before you set this man free, he knew exactly what you were going to do without even knowing that you were going to make a decision, without even knowing that what they were in there for.
Is this so?
Yes, sir.
What is his name?
Joseph.
Where is he from?
The land of Canaan.
Where is he now?
He's in the prison, sir.
Bring me Joseph.
Right away, sir.
And tell him nothing of my dreams.
Yes.
Now, Joseph is in a prison. The Bible says that it would be 2 long years before this cupbearer would remember how Joseph freed him. And if you remember from that illustrated sermon 2 weeks ago, as Joseph interpreted the dream, he told him, please don't forget about me. When you're by the Pharaoh, please don't forget who I am. The Bible says in Genesis chapter 41, if you read the passage in verse 1 of 41, when 2 full years had passed, the Pharaoh had these dreams. 2 years later, it took 2 long years for that guy to remember the favor that was done to him by Joseph in interpreting his dreams. 2 full years later, his faith is finally rewarded. 2 full years later of a dirty, dingy dungeon in a place of suffering and extreme pain. 2 years later. Now, you and I, there's probably times in our lives when we know, God, you can do this in 1 week, you can do this in 2 weeks. God, if you just take care of this in 2 months. But 2 years later, and you're asking God for something, your faith might begin to get a little weak. Your faith might begin to stumble a little. He probably had some long, lonely nights in that prison. He probably suffered ridicule and shame in that prison. He probably became sick while in that prison. He probably had days that were weak, and his faith might have become weak while in that prison. He probably thought in those 2 years, maybe God forgot. Now, in those 2 long years, God had already done a miracle in life. He's already seen the supernatural. 2 years later, he's still suffering. We never hear once in the Bible that he questioned God. We never hear once in the Bible that he turned his back on God. We never hear once in the Bible that he would look to heaven with a clenched fist and say, what's wrong with you, God? Why would this happen to him? How could this take place? 2 years later. I want you to think of something you're asking God for right now. I want you to think of something that you've been saying, God, will you do this for me? Will you help me at work? Will you help my family, my loved one? Will you help us buy a church? Hallelujah. I want you to think of something you've been asking God for. 2 years have gone by. He's been faithful to God. He's been humble. He's been a servant. He's been doing everything right. And then at the right precise time, you see that the cupbearer remembered. You see that the cupbearer remembered. You know what? There is a man. And I'm going to tell you something. You need to be ready for those God appointments and those things he puts in your life, because you never know when it's going to come.
Come up the steps and kneel right here. Here, kneel. I cannot now. You know this.
You what?
My faith does not allow me to bow before anyone besides my God, not even in the pain of death.
Come, Joseph. Come closer. Watch closely, wise men. For I know this man will not lie to save his life. Look upon my face.
Surely this is forbidden.
Only to those who know our God. But you, hold your God in higher regard. Surely you will not burn if you see my face. So, you have the gift of interpreting dreams.
It is not I. It is but my God.
Careful! One too many mentions of this God, and I will have you beheaded, and you will be with your head under your arm before your God. Listen closely. I had 2 dreams. In the first dream, there were 7 cows, healthy ones. I was flowing along the river, and then 7 wretched cows came along. Then the 7 wretched cows, thin cows, ate the fat cows. But you couldn't tell, for they looked as wretched as they did before. I don't know what this means.
The second dream?
I did not say anything. Not a single word.
In the second dream, there were 7 ears of corn growing on a stalk, healthy ears. Behind them were 7 withered ears of corn, scorched by the eastern winds. They sprouted teeth and ate the healthy corn. What does this mean? This cannot be good.
God has revealed to Pharaoh what he intends to do. The 2 dreams are one and the same. The 7 fine cows and the 7 ripe ears of corn stand for 7 years of great plenty. Then the 7 unhealthy cows and the 7 withered ears of corn stand for 7 years of great want. There'll be 7 years of famine.
What? As if my brother, the sun, and sister, the moon, would have my dreams interpreted by a slave? Leave! Potiphar, take him from my sight.
Yes, Pharaoh.
Wait, stop.
Yes.
Come back. After thinking quickly, this would take the strength of a man with exceptional qualities. This would take somebody with great administration. A wise man, perhaps. This excludes each of you. Potiphar, perhaps.
An honor.
But I see no greater man than this man himself. For who can be endowed with the Spirit of God such as him? Is there any other man endowed with the Spirit of God as him?
I think not, husband.
Well said, wife. Joseph, you will be my governor. You will be the governor over all of Egypt. I place you above my household, above my kingdom. No man or woman will lift hand or foot without your word. Only this throne will set you apart from me. And she will be your wife. Let us go.
Joseph.
I hope you will look upon me favorably during your way.
Humility, wife.
Now, Joseph interprets this dream. And in the verse my wife read to you at the beginning of the service that I read to you, it says in verse 15 and 16 of chapter 41. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream and no one can interpret it, but I have heard it said that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. In verse 16 he says, I cannot do it, Joseph replied to the Pharaoh, but God will give Pharaoh the answer that he desires. Now, I look at this and I say, Joseph is a man of faith. He's a man of faith who gives God an opportunity to glorify his name before this pagan man who thinks himself is a god. Now,